Hello, everyone. This is part of our Raising Your Voice series, and this is me and Mallory are going to talk about how to support caregivers and parents in a more holistic and trauma-informed way, in a way that is collaborative and especially within clinics, because we know that's a big challenge. So I'll introduce myself really quick, and then Mallory's going to introduce herself, and then we'll get started. So I am a trauma-informed BCBA. I think I've been in the field about 12 years now. I run my own company, Behavior Roots, and really the goal is to offer a higher quality service that focuses a lot on not just ABA support, but also emotions and nervous system, because I'm also a trauma breath coach. So that's a really big goal, is how to create quality relationships, not just within families, but within yourself as well. I will let Mallory introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Malorie Sanchez. I've been in the ABA field. I started out as a brand new baby BT RBT back in 2019. I recently passed my exam, so I'm now a BCBA. So just kind of learning that new role, but I've been in ABA for about 7 years now. I'm also a mom of two young children who are also both on the spectrum, and my daughter is also diagnosed ADHD as well. So I've kind of been on both ends of the table. First, as a parent, my son actually did ABA for about a year when he was younger, and it really helped him a lot. So I've been on that end of the table as a parent with a child getting services, and then now also as a service provider providing ABA services in homes, in daycare, and in schools to young children and older children. And I kind of do it all. I work with them where they're at, whether they're in home, in daycare, in schools, and I just work with them in the environments that they're in every day.
Yeah. Thanks, Mallory, for the introduction. So we'll go ahead and get started. I think something we both agreed on and we just talked about just now is maybe starting with, what does caregiver or parent support look like in clinics, and what might be some of the limitations or frustrations or maybe things that we think need to be integrated in clinics for caregiver support?
Yeah, I definitely think that caregiver and parent support is definitely underutilized. I know it's becoming more practices and more companies are kind of providing more caregiver training and support and stuff as they are treating their child. But it's definitely underutilized. And I think a lot of it is twofold. I think a lot of companies just are not. Really providing the support that they really should be for their families and parents of children that are in their services. And then also, too, a lot of parents, I think, just are so overwhelmed. They might be working, they might be in school, they have, other siblings that have needs as well. So they just might not have the bandwidth as well, or they just don't know that there are services out there, or they're just not aware of how they can better advocate for their child while their child is in ABA services. So I think it's kind of both ends of the stick are a little short on that. And I definitely think that this conversation will help kind of open the door a little bit and kind of bring some awareness to, hey, I'm a parent, I have a kid that has needs. What are my options? What can I do? Not only to support my child when they are receiving services, but what can I do as a parent to better promote and better help, my child through their behavior challenges or whatever they might be facing at home.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I think, when I worked in clinics for so many years, I think one of the biggest things was I felt like it was such a short allocated time to support and meet
Yeah,
with parents and do training. And so
for
you
sure.
do, as a clinician, you do what you can, but it's kind of like you can only do so much with such limited time. And I think what I've found, especially since I've started Behavior Roots, is like, so much of the child support is dependent on the parent support, right? If the parent is not going to implement the strategies or follow through because they're emotionally overwhelmed, because they're just lost, because they're dysregulated, whatever it is, it's going to be really hard to create a really optimal environment for the child, right? Like we can work with the child, run all these programs, and we know that, like, yes, they can master these programs with us or with RBTs, but then what about in the environment with mom and dad or caregivers when we're not there? And I think
Yes.
I've found that, like, in behavior, it's like learning to support parents holistically and individually is just as important as us supporting children. So we create behavior plans for children. But I'm like, what about the parents who when you're struggling with like them not following through or them being resistant or defensive or feeling overwhelmed, like do you know what to do? I feel like I don't know about you, Mallory, like I don't think I got like actual parent support training as a BCBA or RBT.
Yeah.
Like it's just something you just kind of transition into as your role, but like we didn't actually get any sort of therapeutic training. Like, how do we actually support these parents?
Yes, I definitely agree with that. When I spent the last, 6+ years as an RBT, I never did parent training. My job in a clinic was to work with the kids for 40 hours a week, and I never was taught, even when I was going through, getting my clinical hours and going through grad school and everything. I didn't have, chances. And I asked, the BCBA is like, hey, if you're having a meeting with my client's parent, can I sit in? I would like to learn how these meetings go, how parent trainings go. And I just never got that opportunity in those big companies where they just want you to bill being with the kids. And so then I became a BCBA and I'm like, okay, now, I have great support at the company I'm with, and I'm very lucky. And I know it's very rare. Um, Even now as I'm learning, my role, it's like, okay, I'm still working with the kids that I've been working with this whole time in a different role now, but now I'm talking more with the parents. I have them, emailing me or texting me questions and that kind of thing. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, like now they're coming to me as a, SME, a subject matter expert. And I'm just like, okay, I've been working with your kid for the past year in one capacity, doing one-on-one therapy, but now they're coming to me, well, how do I do this? Or what about if this happens? What do I do here? And it's like, oh my gosh, there's so much just untapped potential in most ABA companies that we really do need to have parents, more on board and that kind of stuff and really work with them as a team, because at the end of the day, our client is our number one and the parent's child is their number one as well. So we're working with the same, client, the same kiddo, but we need to be on the same team and on the same page as well to make sure that everything that we're doing and everything that the parents are doing, um, is not hindering, but helping the child at the end of the day too.
Yeah. Yeah. I think there seems to be a very, sometimes, depending on the company, a very big divide of your role and your
Yes.
experience and your exposure, which should not be the case, ideally, right?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
it should start early when you're an RBT, but also
You would
I
think.
feel, yeah, I feel like sometimes BCBAs, like even like transitioning into one, like if you're not equipped and you don't have that experience to know how to fully support a parent, when
Yeah.
you're thrown in that role, you're kind of you're dual navigating, right? You're navigating like, okay, how do I support the parent? Here's some new skills I'm learning, but also how am I supervising my RBTs to make sure that, they can support the parent as well, right?
Yeah.
It's such a ideally it's a collaborative thing, but ideally in the role of ABA, like you get that experience, but I feel like a lot of times it's very separated. I've heard stories where
Yeah.
like, oh, another staff or another part of the company or only the BCBA is going to talk to the parents. And what I'm hearing
Yeah.
often is like the RBTs and like, well, I don't have like no idea what's going on. Like, I don't know what strategies they've recommended. I'm not really sure. I'll have to go to the BCBA. And that makes kind of the RPT like out of the loop. Like it's not really a
Yeah.
team collaborative effort then.
Yeah, and they're the ones working with the child, for goodness sake. They should be part of that. They should have a seat at the table. And that's something that I always advocated for when I was an RBT, and I never got it. Is there always was that divide of, hey, the BCBAs handle the parents, your job is to just handle the child. And I'm like, yes, I get that. But if I'm the one working with your kid 25 hours a week, I should be able to talk to the parents on the progress that their child is making, at the clinic. Like, hey, these are the things we're working on. Maybe, you can work on this at home, or hey, we're working on toothbrushing. Maybe you can work on that at home, those kinds of things. I really do feel like a lot of RBTs, and I definitely felt this for years as an RBT myself, that a lot of them are just they don't get that seat at the table. They don't get that opportunity to not only talk with their own BCBA about what's going on, but then also talk with, parents, or, whoever the legal guardian is, grandparents, or whoever, of that child. And if you're not bringing everybody to the table that's working with that child at the end of the day, then what are we doing?
Yeah.
There's a huge missed opportunity there for sure.
Yeah. I would say, well, actually, I have a question for you. So, especially because your mom, you're
Yeah,
neurodivergent, you have a very
yeah,
unique experience and leverage in some way to like, and plus you've been an RBT for a long time. Like,
yeah,
what is something that you feel like now, especially that you're a BCBA, like you want to
yeah.
integrate or you would change within the medical model system?
I definitely would give those RBTs more opportunities to speak up and to be in on those parent, if there is parent caregiver training, like meetings or updates where we're meeting with the parents and updating them on the behavior plan, or hey, these are the programs we're working on with your child. They need to be able to have that say too. And something that I'm learning as a baby BCBA, and I make sure to tell every RBT that's under me, I'm like, look, I am your teammate here. Yes, I'm your supervisor, but I'm also your teammate here, because at the end of the day, you spend a lot more time with the client than I can. I see you once a week if I'm lucky. You're with them, 20 hours a week. So you see the child, stuff that's happening at the daycare, at the school, at wherever. Your eyes are there the whole time that you're in session with the kiddo. So I always advocate for all my RBTs, like, hey, if you see any new behaviors, if you see anything happening, maybe there's stuff going on with a client and a peer, and we need to work on peer interactions, whatever it is, please tell me, because you guys are the eyes and ears. And if I don't see it, I don't know. And I don't know how to fix things that I don't know anything about. And I think that's where a lot of our BTs too, they just don't get that opportunity to necessarily reach out. I always tell all my RBTs, my Slack is on my phone. Message me at any time. I will get back to you. You please tell me anything that's going on that I need to know about, because at the end of the day, I'm here to support you and to support our client.
Yeah.
I need to have that back and forth, open book dialogue with all of my RBTs that are with me.
Yeah. The communication piece is really important.
Absolutely. I've
Yeah.
worked with so many supervisors over the years, getting my clinical hours and working at different companies. And I had great supervisors who, if I saw something, I felt like I could, email them or message them and be like, hey, I'm having a rough session, this, and this is going on. Can you help me, or can you help problem solve it? I have one RBT who's amazing, and she does that all the time. She'll be in session at home with our client, and she's like, hey, this is going on. How do you want me to handle it? And it's fantastic, because then I'm like, great, I feel like I'm actually doing something. I feel like I'm actually helping her and helping our client at the end of the day. I've also had some, unfortunately, not great supervisors who just were closed books. And the only time I would see them is either in supervision or in our one-to-one meetings. But other than that, I just had to figure it out. If there was a problem, if it was a rough session, oh well, I just got to figure it out and tough through it, because if I tried messaging them, I wouldn't get any answer, and I don't feel that's fair.
Yeah.
So,
And I think that's where like the lack of training
yeah,
for BCBAs on
yes, the
like
lack
how to
of soft
support parents.
skills, the
Yeah.
lack of soft skills. Oh
Yes.
my God.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, it's funny because like and I think like 100%, right? Like I'm just so surprised that when you become a BCBA, there is no official training for BCBAs on those soft skills
Ooh.
of like what does collaboration look like? What does it professionally look like? What does it mean?
Yes.
Like we're not trained. I mean, it's like you're either naturally you have those skills and you bring those into your team and your work, or you don't. And then
Yes.
unfortunately, you get a supervisor, like you're saying, where they come and go out. They don't really help you. They don't have much
Yep.
input. They're just there to like give you the hours or like modify the
Yep.
program.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. And it really was a bummer because I would have great clients and I always wanted to see those wins. That was always like what kept me going. Like even in the rough days in a clinic, I had a client that I've been working on a program with for weeks and finally like that day they got it. Like they got the right answer or they got a correct instead of an incorrect. And I'm like, "Oh my God." And I remember looking around and next time I saw my BCB, I'm like, "Oh, you won't believe so and so finally, made progress on this target." And they're like, "Okay, thanks." And it's like, what are you doing? Like, what are we here for? Like, we're here for the client's wins at the end of the day. Like, any progress is good progress, and we should be celebrating every every progress that our clients are making.
Yeah.
We should be celebrating all of those wins.
I have a question since you're a neurodivergent mom, you have
Yep.
neurodivergent children. If you
Oh
were
yeah.
receiving ABA services, what
Mhm.
is, like, aside from the communication piece that we've been talking about, what is
Yeah.
something that you would want to experience from the ABA team or from the BCBA
Yeah.
yourself?
Absolutely. So I'm going to kind of backtrack a quick second. So when my son was in ABA, he was 4 at the time, and he did it for a year. He's 9 now, so this was about 5 years ago. So I was still pretty new to the field at the time that he was receiving services. He received, I think it was about somewhere in the vicinity of 35 hours a week. And he was in a clinic setting with other, 2 to 6 year olds. It was one of those early intervention type of clinics for a pretty big company in my area. And at the time, I was still kind of learning ABA. I had finished grad school, but I had only kind of just started on my hours and everything. So from my end, at that time, I would just drop my son off at the clinic, the RBT. This was still kind of COVID time, so they would come outside and get my son from the car, bring him into the clinic, that kind of things, because parents weren't allowed in the clinic because, COVID. Um, and everything. And at the end of the day, they would bring him back out and they're like, "Oh yeah, he had a great day. This is the time, he napped because he still would nap occasionally." And that was kind of all the feedback I got. I would have an occasional, like maybe once a month if I was lucky, I was able to catch his BCBA for an hour for parent training. But other than that, like I was working full time, I was in school, I was getting my hours, I was so focused on my own kind of stuff that I felt like, okay, well, he's getting help he needs at the clinic. And I wasn't as involved as I could have been. And now looking at it, I am looking at possibly getting some part-time ABA for both of my kiddos. I would like for them to both have some in-home services that hopefully I can get them both in later this year for just like a few hours a week. And I definitely plan on being more collaborative. I definitely, want the BCBA on my kiddos' cases, especially with my son, to be like, hey, I want them to reach out to me and my husband and be like, "Hey, what goals do you want for your son? Like, what are some things he needs to work on? Like, where?" And I feel like this is another soft skills kind of lacking kind of thing where, a lot of BCBAs, they assess the kid and then they put in for X amount of hours and then they just start programming. But at the end of the day, like is what we're working on actually beneficial to the family? Or should we also be having that conversation with the family and siblings and whoever and be like, hey, what are some things that your child is struggling with at home? Like, what are things that you need them to work on or to be better at or to learn how to do? And then that's where the programming piece comes in. Okay, you might be, as a BCBA, you might be working with a kiddo in school and see that they need all sorts of, academic help and social skills help and all that. And that's great. But maybe the parents need him to learn how to tie his shoes so they can get out the door faster in the morning. Maybe they need him to learn how to eat with the spoon so he can eat a cereal in the morning before they leave the house. Maybe he needs more of those independent living skills. So there definitely needs to be that conversation from the beginning, um, of that relationship with the family and with your client on, hey, what are actually the most meaningful goals that this family needs, and how can I program for that and implement those in the settings that we're in with our client?
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I know, like coming from a trauma-informed approach,
Yep.
and also when I used to not be trauma-informed and being trained in, okay, you go in, run the assessment. I feel like traditionally what I've seen is people or BCBAs will go in, run the VB map or whatever, ABLES, whatever
Yep.
assessment, right? And then they literally create their goals from that assessment.
Yes.
Versus
Yes.
what I feel like should be happening is that actually should be almost more of a backup. If you need
Yes.
additional goals, great. You have your system
Absolutely.
to offer tons, but
You have
for
your
me,
library full of stuff to pull from, you know?
yeah. But
Yeah.
like I think and I'd love to know your thoughts, but like even
Yep.
just from a neurodivergent affirming perspective, like it
Yep.
really should be about advocacy,
Yes.
autonomy. How do we help this child become more independent, but also advocate for their needs because we know that's a
Absolutely.
struggle for them and they
Yeah.
process differently and they need more support in that. So
Yep.
my goal is to always, when I am assessing a family or a child, one, how do I, the first like top five goals is how do I teach them to advocate, whether that's functional communication or any other modality. And
Yep.
two, what does it look like to, like you said, support the parent? So what is
Yes.
the parent struggling with? What are their needs? And what is
Yep.
the child's needs, right?
Yep.
Sometimes the parent, I think, struggles with understanding what the child's needs are. And that's where hopefully we come in to assess and say, oh, it looks like this child really needs this, and this would really help build a closer relationship with their parent. So,
Yep.
looking at what the parent needs, what the child needs, and then if you need more goals, whether that's down the line or later, then you can use the assessments you've used. But I feel like
Yep.
clinically that can get tricky because you're like, oh, well, you have
Yes.
to have one a certain number of goals. It needs to be based off the assessment, which I
Yeah.
think there are creative ways to get around and to reword. But I feel like sometimes our approach to creating goals and what we prioritize is backwards.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And I've seen that in clinicals, like in clinics, in clinics, the way I was taught, working there was exactly what you just said. It's like, okay, here's your assessment, run your assessment. Here's a bank of goals you can pull from, individualize it for your client and ready go. And it's like, okay, like I can understand that to an extent with our very young learners and that kind of thing that are kind of learning the basics and manding and tacting and all that. I can understand that to an extent. But then at the end of the day, like I said, now I work where the client is. I work in their homes. I work in their schools. I work in their daycares. I work where the client actually is living and breathing and spending the majority of their day. So that's where those goals need to come from is, okay, this kid is in daycare, 8, 9 hours a day. What are the struggles they're having in daycare? It's not necessarily learning how to tact colors or anything like that. It's like, okay, maybe there's some peer aggression going on because they need to develop some social skills on peer interactions and taking turns and that kind of thing. Okay, that's going to be more socially significant. I need to work on that. So it's really about meeting your client where they're at and where they spend the majority of their day, and then creating the goals around their environment. That's the whole point of what we do, is creating goals around their environment. So why are we, doing all these cut and pastes in clinics when, we need to be working with the kids in their daily living environment with their families, at their school, at their daycare, wherever they're at. That's where we need to be. That's where we need to be.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. Okay, well, we're like 30 minutes in already. So let's transition to another topic on caregiver support. Um,
Sure.
what do you feel like? are some things, whether that's for you personally, like what you would want to experience, or what, based off what you've experienced so far as a new BCBA, like what are some strategies that you feel like would be helpful to foster a more therapeutic and strong relationship with the caregivers?
It's definitely building that relationship from day one. I made it a point as an RBT before I even got my BCBA, and this was just me. But I feel like, even with RBTs as well, a lot of them lack those soft skills as well. So it's really just starting out in that RBT field and building that relationship and that rapport with those parents, whether you're working in their home environment, in the school, wherever you're working with that client, you should be having those conversations and should be talking with the parents and everything there. In the home environment, it's kind of easy because you have a mom or dad or grandparent or somebody there with you during the session. They might not be there, but inviting them into some of those sessions sometimes and be like, hey, I just want you to sit on the couch and kind of watch what we're doing because, these are the things we're working on. And, really have that RBT kind of pull in the parents as needed in those home sessions, essentially, like a obviously, but really pull in those parents and really start building that relationship and then keep that going for the BCBA as well. So when they come in for supervision or anything, then, they can ask those questions. The parents might have questions. I have one client right now who struggles out in the community, and mom's like, what do I do? And I'm like, well, we work with him in home, so we're not seeing any of this because he's at home. He's not at the store. So we're going to plan on doing an outing to the store so that we can see what she's talking about and then we can problem solve with her, there. So it really is just bringing those parents in and keeping them in the loop on what's going on and what we're programming for, why we're programming for it, and also asking the parents like, hey, are these goals you even want your kid to be working on? If not, let's scrap it and you tell me like what your kid needs to be working on. They need to be working on being more independent. They need to be cleaning up their room. They need to be learning how to tie their shoes, any of those kind of independent living skills as they get older, because eventually a kid is going to be an adult and they need to be as independent as possible. So that should be stuff we should be looking into the future with, as well as programming for the future, not just for the right now.
Yeah, yeah, I agree with all of that. I think, I think from my perspective, like what I feel, I wish companies would emphasize more on is teaching and facilitating soft skills, like we've been talking about, but soft
Oh,
skills
it's so severely
specifically.
needed.
Yeah, and I think for me specifically, from a trauma approach, it's a lot of it is about knowing how to show empathy,
Yep.
knowing how to engage in reflective listening. So, like, actually listening to the parent and what's going on with
Yeah.
them. Because I think as
Yes.
behavior analysts, a lot of times we're trained so strongly in our analytical problem solving skills. So, I know for me
Yes.
in the past, I've definitely like, I'm going in and I'm listening, but what I'm really thinking in my head is like, what solutions and strategies can I give them? How can I solve
Yes.
this problem right away? What can I do? What program can I, like, my brain is automatically already in problem solving mode. However,
Yes.
that's not always beneficial to building that
That's not
relationship.
always what they need. Sometimes
Yeah.
some parents, bless them, are so just burnt out or exhausted that sometimes, and this is what I'm learning too, is, sometimes you have parents that in the moment, they don't need you to problem solve. They just need you to listen and they just need somebody to vent to. And that's okay.
Yeah.
I need people to vent to too sometimes. And so that's okay. So, something that I'm learning with my own kind of communication style is when I see that with parents, I'll kind of ask them, I'm like, hey, are you looking for a solution right now? Or are you just looking for a listening ear? Because I can do either, but I just need you to tell me which one to do, and then if you just need me to sit quietly and just you vent, absolutely have at it. Or, hey, they have a specific problem that they need help with. Okay, great. Let's sit here. You tell me the problem. Let's try to come up with some solutions for it. So it really just depends on what the parent needs that day.
Yeah. And I feel like by you simply asking that, what you're creating is a space for them to feel heard, to feel
Yep.
validated, to feel like, oh, I'm not just a problem to be solved. or I'm not just here as like, another service, because I think it's very easy for
Yes.
us to do that, especially with multiple clients. But
Oh
I
yeah.
think what we need is like, especially when you're overwhelmed, especially when you have
Yeah.
a neurodivergent child, it is so overwhelming. It's a lot.
Yeah.
And so, like,
Yes.
I think,
Caregiver burnout is real.
yeah, very, very real. Like a different level of burnout, right?
Yes.
I feel like one time I was talking to a BCBA mentee and she was asking about like, well, what should I do when the parent is like clearly so dysregulated or the parent or caregiver is
Yeah.
refusing to do XYZ, right? So you're experiencing this form of defensiveness or resistance or dysregulation from the parent. And a lot of times BCBs don't actually have the therapeutic skills or know what to do to de-escalate or support them
Yes.
therapeutically. So only
Yeah.
because I'm trained in breathwork and trained in the nervous system and emotions, I can offer my mentees strategies. And that's kind
Yeah.
of why you hire a mentor, right? But otherwise, how would we know, right? We're
Yeah.
not trained in these things.
Exactly. I mean, I'm lucky enough that I have a bachelor's degree in psychology and I started my master's in psych before I switched over. And so I have some of those kind of prereq type of skills of being a talk therapist and knowing how to ask those questions and that kind of thing. But most, 99% of other BCBAs don't, and so you with your trauma, background as well, it's like, what you see and you know how to kind of de-escalate certain things to the best of your ability with your clients. And I feel like that kind of goes hand in hand with the lack of soft skills that we've been talking about this whole conversation about how we are so we put on that analytical lens, but at the same time, at the end of the day, we're all human and sometimes we just need to vent.
Yeah.
So, and
And
that's
I
okay.
think, you know, it's funny because our services are called behavioral therapy,
Yeah.
but we
I
don't
was wondering if you
actually
were going to get to this.
we don't actually get training in therapeutic approaches, but in more the
No.
science, the analytical, the data science is
Yes.
great. But I'm like,
Yes.
but if we're being called behavioral therapy, that is almost so
We
deceiving.
should have some more psych intersection. There
Yes,
should be
we
some
need
more
more training, whether
intersection with
that's in our
psychology.
masters
Yes.
or where or is the supervision
Yes.
training wherever it is. But I'm like, I just feel like we set families up for failure when we don't have those skills, whether that's soft skills or therapeutic skills. But I
Yeah.
just feel like when I'm working with parents, my priority, the first thing I want to know is about them, not
Yes.
just the child, right? I ask them, like, in my personalized assessments, like, what is your history of punishment with AB, if any? What is your history of punishment with XYZ? What were your parents like growing up and how did they handle conflict? How do you, as the parents, handle stress? It's so funny because a lot of parents are like, well, my child does this. I'm like, no, actually, I want to know about you. Like, I
Yeah.
want to get to know you because
How are you handling all the
right.
things?
That
Yes.
that's gonna one tell me how they model those strategies, what strategies they model to the child, right?
Yep.
So it helps me with my parent goals, but also it helps me get to know them better. So I'm
Yeah.
fostering relationships that way as well. Is like I'm not just getting to know the child and spending all my time with the child. I'm really getting to know the parent and how I can support them because I know, oh, they get triggered by this or they have a history of this. This is what they really need supported and what this is what works best for them.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, let's see. Let's transition to another topic
Sure.
about, I guess, do you have any other additional strategies for supporting parents or caregivers that might be a bit more holistic? And I can offer my perspective from trauma-informed approach, but like that you either were never trained in or that you're like, this is something I want to do or I believe needs to be done in clinics. Anything that's like maybe a bit more holistic or just different, you feel like you didn't experience before.
I don't know. I mean, something I'm trying to get back into that I was into for, years was yoga because I felt like with the movement, the body, the breath work, all of that stuff, it's moving meditation. I mean, that's literally what yoga is. And I did it for years. And then unfortunately, I kind of nosedived a few years ago. And now I'm looking at getting back into it. But I think that for a lot of caregivers and a lot of parents is, especially in our society is not built for helping others, like, or helping people. Everybody, especially now, everybody is underpaid, overworked, burnt out, all of the things. So I think what would be the most beneficial for any parent or caregiver is looking at what your biggest struggle is, your biggest hurdle is, and working on ways to kind of knock out that hurdle a little bit, whether it's finances, maybe you need a better job, or maybe you need a second job to kind of get debt in order. Maybe you need, yoga or meditation or something to kind of get your mind right. Whatever it is that, a parent or caregiver needs to, not only help lift themselves up, but, you can't pour from an empty cup. So if you have a parent or caregiver that is just running on, an empty battery, okay, what do they need to fill up their battery and fill up their cup? For them first, put on their mask first, like they always tell you, put on your own mask first before you put on somebody else's mask in an airplane. It's kind of the same thing. So something that I think is a huge need, and I think this is where, people like you come in, is, you have those gaps of a lot of caregivers are just like I said, the caregiver burnout is so real. And so that's where people like you can come in and provide those services and provide that guidance and mentorship to help kind of build up, the confidence, build up, some other techniques in their toolbox for parents and caregivers so that they can feel better. And then once they feel better, then they can help their child feel better, at the end of the day.
Yeah. Has there been something in your personal journey in motherhood that's helped?
I mean, like I said, yoga did for a very long time, and that's something I'm looking forward to really getting back into, because just with my own kind of, mental health issues and all that kind of stuff, I'm also coming up on middle age here, so I'm going to be dealing with other hormonal imbalances that I've started noticing a shift with lately. And so it's like, okay, how can I kind of get ahead of this and see what's coming up and kind of nip it now, or if I need to take supplements or whatever I need to be doing to kind of help me through that process, then that's what I'll do.
Yeah.
But it comes down to everybody's, body and their personal needs and what it is that they need, day by day or week by week.
Yeah. It's like, I mean, I'm kind of navigating that with my own pregnancies. Like, how
Yeah.
do I build my resource toolbox? And obviously, that's going to be
Yes.
very individual to me. But like,
Yeah.
I don't want to wait to get to a point of like, oh, I have the baby and then I'm overwhelmed, stressed,
If
I've lost my identity. No, I hopefully
yes.
I've created antecedents where I have my toolbox to bring me back or ground me or bring me back to my identity. So I know like I have those things to go back to.
Yeah, and build up your community too, whether it's with your spouse or with other family members too, that like, hey, advocacy, we were just talking about having and teaching our clients to advocate for themselves. Well, that goes for us too as practitioners. And I think this is where a lot of burnout is coming from in our field, is so many BCBAs are running on empty because we're so busy trying to fill everybody else's cup that at the end of the day, it's like there's nothing left for us. What are we doing to fill up our own cups at the end of the day to make sure that we're not burning out, we're not leaving the field, because of the high turnover, all that kind of stuff. Like, what are we doing to protect ourselves at the end of the day too?
Yes, I can't remember if it was us talking about this, but I feel like I remember mentioning this with someone about how like I'm like, why don't companies do an individualized reinforcer assessment or just assess in
Yes,
general too?
yes,
Do you remember that with
yes, yes.
employees, not families,
Yes,
employees, right? Like
yes. And
you don't
especially
know
like
your
it doesn't matter if you're neurodivergent or neurotypical.
Mhm.
Like for me personally, like positive praise is like the best thing you can give to me. Like that is my communication style. And every company, everywhere I've worked at, I would tell my supervisor, I'm like, hey, look, don't just come to me when I've done a bad job. I mean, yes, please come to me if I've done a bad job because I need to know so I can fix it. But at the end of the day, like, it takes 2 seconds and $0 to tell me, hey, that was a really good session. You did really good today. Like, I feel like there's just not enough positivity left for employees at the end of the day. It's all about, reprimands and, consequences, but we're teaching reinforcement for our clients, but then us as adults, as employees, we don't get reinforced. Like, what's going on
Yeah.
here?
Yeah.
There's a big lack of that.
There's a lack of human treatment within even just our
Yes.
own healthcare or our own
Yes.
like system because
Yes.
I don't know if that's insurance pressure or anything else,
I
but
think
like,
it's just everything.
yeah, I just feel like, yeah, like I've heard like, oh, companies might give you a Starbucks gift card because you met this or, but I'm like, again, like
Yeah.
you said, like everyone's different. How they
Yeah.
feel loved or safe or reinforced is going to look different. We have to be
Yeah.
able to individualize that just like we individualize plans for children.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that that's something where companies need to step up and realize that as, employers and supervisors, they need to be reinforcing their employees and their subordinates in a way that works for them, not for the employer, but for the employee. Because at the end of the day, you have happy, healthy, well-paid employees. Guess what? They're going to stick around longer. If
Yeah,
you have
that
underpaid,
prevents burnout.
overworked, yeah, if you have burnt out, underpaid, overworked employees, then you're gonna, have like some of these companies have where they have 100% turnover every year. Like, what are they doing? What are they doing?
Yeah, it's unfortunate.
Yeah.
Um, I will go back to the question I was asking just to answer
Yes.
as well in terms of like how to holistically or even from a trauma informed how we can support caregivers or parents. I think for me because I'm trauma informed, which the other day someone asked me like, "Hey, is being trauma informed, does that change, has that changed your approach as a BCBA?" And I told her, yes, 100%. I think getting training and educating yourself and learning how to apply these strategies, understanding what's going on in a child or parent or adult's body, you
Absolutely.
know, we're so good in ABA at understanding the why and analyzing and modifying the environment, but we're not good at offering a compassionate lens of like, hey, this is what's actually going on when they're escaping, when they're
Yeah,
trying to access attention. I think there is a lack of understanding of that. And it's funny because I thought that's what ABA does, like we understand behaviors, but there is a limit in our training, I think, to what degree. And I
I
think,
agree.
if every parent and caregiver is going to be different in terms of what I can suggest. But I feel
Sure.
like the one thing we all need is a listening ear.
Yep.
Um, and breath work for me, particular, I feel like has helped me slow down, right? And I feel like that's with parents having so much going on. That's something
Yeah.
that we can teach is like, what does it look like to get in touch with your body and to slow down a bit? Because if
Yeah.
we
Just
cannot slow
pause.
down, yeah, if we cannot
Yeah.
pause, like we don't know what's going on around us. We're just like go, 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 go,
Reacting.
go. And it becomes an
Reacting,
addictive
reacting.
cycle, addictive pattern,
Yes.
behavioral pattern. Um,
Yes.
and I feel like just making sure that parents, like you said, learn their own self-care tools because a lot of
Yes.
parents don't have their own
They just
self-care.
don't.
And
They don't.
sometimes like we have to help facilitate that as a prerequisite for helping the child.
I agree. I agree. It's a lot of, I feel like in ABA too, a lot of people are so, they see things and they're like, okay, when this happens, this is how you react to it. It's all the reactive strategies, which, yes, absolutely, we need that. But something that goes along with another gap in our field, and something that I try to work on in my own practice as a BCBA, is I'm looking at the before. I'm looking at the antecedents. I'm looking at trying to catch stuff before that happens, because then it makes everybody's job easier. If you work on those proactive antecedent strategies to catch things before they happen, guess what? A lot of that stuff that you're having problems with is not going to happen anymore. So it's kind of a win-win, but I think that there's, and I think some of that goes to, grad school and those types of programs where, yeah, you have the ABC as an antecedent behavior consequence, but I feel like there's not enough of a pressure hold on antecedent strategies. I feel like if God bless. I feel like 9 times out of 10, you can really head stuff off before it happens. If you see a lot of those precursor behaviors or that kind of stuff, you're like,
Yeah.
okay, I see my kid twitching over here, which means if I don't, reinforce something now, then it's going to explode and the room's going to be in shambles. So it's catching those things before things happen, that where I think a lot of the work needs to be shifting to, as well as a lot more antecedent types of strategies. And yes, consequence strategies and reactive strategies as well. But I really do feel like there needs to be a bit more of a culture shift, or a behavior shift into catching stuff beforehand.
I I'm I feel so strongly about that topic, but
I do too. I do too. Oh, it's a big
like
one. I see it all the
the
time.
yeah, like in some of my sessions, when I'm guiding other BCBAs, they're like, well, we talk a lot about like, oh, here, take a breath, or hold a squeezy toy, or like we're talking about a lot of consequential reactive reaction responses, right? Of like, okay, this
Yeah.
behavior occurs, what should we do? And I'm like,
Yes.
I'm going to be honest, as a trauma breath coach, I can tell you right now, taking a deep breath is not helpful when you are triggered and dysregulated. It is too
Yeah. No.
late. It's
No,
too
if
late.
you're in the
Yeah.
middle of flipping out, having a tantrum, and somebody's trying to tell you to take deep breaths, I'm going to be like, screw you. I'm
Right.
going
Don't
over
touch me.
here. Like, get away. So I
Right.
get it. And that's something I try to teach my RBTs too, is like, look for those precursors, look for those little moments in time where you see things kind of before the shift happens. And that's where you kind of need to be capturing that opportunity, and modifying your programs for that to the antecedent strategies. Catch that stuff and work on that stuff beforehand. It's one thing to work with a 5-year-old on self-regulation and deep breath and coaching skills, but you can't do it when they're dysregulated. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah.
They're already dysregulated. The moment's already passed. You're going to have to just kind of wait out the tantrum at that point. Or you can, when they are regulated, then you can step in and be like, hey, I see we're having fun right now, we're having such a calm moment. Let's go ahead and let's practice those deep breaths now while we're feeling all nice and calm. It'll feel even better. So it's catching them and teaching those skills when they're in regulation versus teaching the skills when they're dysregulated. Because I know for myself, as an autistic individual, if I'm dysregulated, I, I just got to wait it out until I get regulated again before I can come to terms with, okay, maybe I should have done that differently, or maybe I should have said that differently, kind of thing. But in the moment, there's nothing that can be changed, you
Yeah.
know?
And it could be as simple as like tracking those precursors of like
Yes.
clenched fists, holding your
Yeah.
breath, which sometimes can be hard to read, right? But like little body cues and teaching
Body language cues.
yeah, if
Yes.
the child is old enough, obviously, to teach them those body cues, what's going on.
Absolutely.
But like if
Yeah.
not, like at least you can externally observe that and make sure you're tracking that and putting it in their behavior plan, putting it in their treatment
Absolutely.
part.
Yeah.
Um,
In all of my behavior plans, I have antecedent strategies, like you said, with the precursors. Look for this, this, and this. If you see this, this, and this, that's when you need to step in, because catching them when they're having shallow breaths, or when their, fists are clenched, that kind of thing, is a lot better than them chucking chairs across the room, because
I,
then we got a bigger problem. So it's really just trying to catch that stuff before it happens. I don't know. I see it all the time with RBTs and other BCBAs. Other BCBAs, I see the precursors on their clients, and then all of a sudden a big old tantrum, and then they're like, tracking the tantrum and all that other stuff. I'm like, you probably could have stopped most of that. Not
yes,
always, but you
yeah.
probably could have
But we
stopped a
get
lot of
caught
that
up
beforehand.
collecting the data
Yep.
for our work, for
Yep.
tracking, reporting it
Yeah.
on our thing. But I'm like, that's where the human side can get easily disregarded or missed,
Yes.
where we're like so focused on like, oh, tracking it. I remember when I was RBT once, I was expected to track not only handle and manage 6 different behavior problems, but also track and reinforce and have a reinforcement system for all 6. It,
Yes.
of
You
course,
can't
that's
keep
all
up
I'm
with
going to
all
focus
that.
on. Yeah, that's
There's
like
no way.
I'm overwhelmed with that, but
Yeah,
also like I can't think of anything
no.
else, right?
Even
Because
the
I'm
best
so busy.
RBTs with years of experience is not going to be able to differentiate in the moment what consequence strategy they need to have with their client when their client's, trying to chuck chairs at them. It's not going to
Yeah,
happen. They're
yeah,
going to, you know, catch that stuff before it happens, nine times out
yeah.
of 10. I really think a lot of stuff can get headed off if more people just paid attention to those body language cues or that kind of stuff, or if they're turning away from you, or they're saying something, they're they're starting to creep up. That's when you need to catch it.
Yeah, I think and I don't know if this is more trauma informed, but something I've learned over the years is like timing really matters, right? So like you're saying,
Yes.
especially if you're neurodivergent and you are stuck in that moment,
Yep.
I think a lot of times it's BCBAs included where they're like, oh,
Yep.
immediately offer replacement behavior. Replace it, tell them they can do that, say this instead,
Yep.
do this instead. And I'm like, it's not helpful to offer a
Yeah.
replacement behavior or response or teach them that while they're
Yeah.
still in a dysregulated state.
No.
It is not,
No.
you're not going to do it, then you're going to get disappointed, then you're going to be trying to figure out what else to do. But
Yeah.
if you understand, like, hey, what does it look like to validate them, emotionally meet them where they're at? Again,
Yeah.
therapeutic skills that are going to be a lot more beneficial in de-escalating them. And then
Yes.
when the time's right, you can offer those practical strategies to teach them. But timing,
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. I temporarily worked with this client at this daycare, and very, very sweet child, but definitely would get dysregulated like this. And he would go hide under a table, and you'd have the RBT and the BCBA trying to talk to him, and I was like, oh man, this is gonna get bad real quick. And then that's when, you could tell him going under the table, he wanted space. Well, then you got these adults coming at him, and then you got peers
yeah,
being like, hey, what's going on? So then you got peers coming, and then all of a sudden you have 4 or 5 people around this kid when all he wants is to be left alone for 30 seconds. Leave the kid alone for 30
him
seconds, for
hiding
the
under
love of
the desk
God.
should have been
Come on.
red flag. Yeah, signal.
Because then he would get mad and he would start, flipping tables and stuff because his cues are, hey, I'm going to go
You're not
hide
being
under
honored.
table. You're not, no, you're not. They're not being
Yeah,
honored. And so then, people get hurt because then it's like at that point you're having to do reactive stuff when it's like, okay, the antecedent was he went and hid under a table. That's when you tell the peers to go away. You just tell the other adults even too, like, hey, as long as he's being safe under the table, just leave him under there for a moment or two. Let him collect himself. He'll come out when he's ready. And then you can go on from there. Sometimes, even as an adult, God, I wish there was some times where I could just hide under a table and be like, I just need everybody to leave me alone for 5 minutes.
yeah, yeah. We're
It's
like
it's
that
the
as
same
adults
thing.
too. Yeah, we need the
100%.
space. I'm like, it's like when
Yeah.
like I feel like it's common for females, like when we're upset, we don't want our
Oh,
husbands or someone coming straight in and giving us a problem to solve and telling us what to do
oh,
and
absolutely
like,
not.
like, right? I'm like, dude, we need one, we need emotional support, and two, we
Yeah.
need space, right? We
Yeah.
don't need
Oh
yeah.
yeah. Oh yeah. My husband, bless him, is totally the problem solver type. And so he'll be like, "Well, you should do this, this, and this." And I'm like, "I just need five, like, get out of this room. Like, go away. Like, give me five
Right.
minutes. Like, leave me
Yeah. And the
alone."
difference is children don't have the voice to always communicate that, or it's
No.
not respected or honored if
I
they
was
do
just gonna
request
say,
that.
or it's not honored, because I have seen so many kids that have done such great self-advocacy skills, even if they're as young as 5. I've seen kids be like, hey, I need space. And then you still have the teacher or the para or whoever be like, well, you need to do this or you need to do this. No, the kid just told you you need space. Back the F off for like 2 minutes. Like, back off.
Yeah.
Like I do feel like there's a lot of that human component where we expect kids to be robots and we expect adults to be robots. And guess what? None of us are robots. So why are
Yeah.
we expecting 100% compliance, whether they're a 5-year-old or a 25-year-old? Like
Yeah.
why? What are we doing?
I know we were supposed to actually talk about the topic of compliance-driven parent support versus collaborative and neurodiversity affirming, but we are at time. So
Yes,
it could be a topic that anyone who's watching can always reach out to us to talk about more. But I know that's something we have experience in and we'd love to talk about more. But
absolutely.
we'll end the chat here since we're at an hour. But is there anything you kind of want to end with, Mallory, or anything you want to like a last advice that you want to leave with?
I just appreciate anybody that listens in or spends time listening to this. This was a great hour. I learned a lot from Annie. I'm sure hopefully you've learned something from me as well. But this was a great chat, and hopefully, um, we can do more luncheon talks, in the future
Yeah.
with other topics and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.